I'll go ahead and introduce you now, Judy. We've got Judy Terry here, who was born and raised in Iowa, which I think is important. It gives you a lot of credibility for gardening in Iowa, which is very different than gardening in other places. And you've been a master gardener for over 25 years. And you've written cookbooks, and you have written a column on gardening for the Press Citizen for 26 years. So I think you qualify as a gardening expert, and we're really glad to have you with us today.
Thank you very much, Joanne. I'm glad to be here. And also now I can see myself and you. Should I be plugging into some other pictures, some other people? No.
I think you're okay.
I'm okay.
Unless you want to see faces for reactions, most of us turn our cameras off anyway. And then as you get going, if there's questions in the chat, I'll just ask them to you.
Okay. I was going to ask for some, comments later on. So, all right.
You could also go up to view on the right-hand side, right top, and change it to gallery. And that way you'd see everybody.
Yeah, now I can see everybody. Oh, okay. I should know that. I've been doing Zoom for 2 years. Hi, it's nice to see everybody here. And I am glad to be here also and to talk about gardening. And thank you for having me. When I was a little girl, a long time ago, I stayed away from gardening as much as possible. I just never seemed to hear my mother call me when she was going to go to the garden and wanted some help. Actually, I was afraid of worms and bugs and snakes. I'm still afraid of snakes, but I have gotten used to worms and bugs, and they don't seem to bother me that much anymore. I am a master gardener, as was my husband, Bill. We took the classes together at the extension office in 1995 or 1994. It's 40 hours of classes in horticulture and like 3 hours a week for about 8 weeks or something like that. And then you have to do 40 hours of volunteer work in the community. And that's what we did for about the next 20 years or so. In 1995, well, actually, one thing I did for my volunteer hours was, you mentioned the cookbooks, and that we needed some fundraising out there because we didn't have anything but just a little patch of tomatoes to show people what the master gardeners were doing, and we wanted to have a demo garden. And so I coordinated a cookbook, and everybody brought their recipes, and we sold it, and we were able to get and a demonstration garden that was probably 30 foot long and maybe another 10 feet wide or so, right by the pig barn, which was okay, but sometimes this is a little bit different. So that was our demonstration garden, and we would plant that with a lot of different things, a lot of tomatoes and a lot of flowers, anything that anybody wanted to plant, so that we could show it to the fairgoers when they came out, and show them what the master gardeners were doing and showing them what plants could be done. And so that was why we did the cookbooks. In 1995, I started writing the Green Thumb column in the Press Citizen. And at first it was only in the summer. And then around the millennium, they asked me to write it year round. So I wrote up to 50 to 52 columns each year. And but now I just write every other week. And that is kind of a relief to have a week off there. I like the writing and I like the research a lot, but I also like to get my hands in the dirt. There's such a satisfaction in planting and planting a seed or a seedling and watching it grow and taking care of it, and watching it flower, or seeing the vegetables that you have growing on your table later on. I think there's a feeling of satisfaction and expectation once you plant the seed, and when it breaks through the ground, then that's kind of exciting. How many of you garden now? I want to hear your gardening stories later on. Okay. Oh, good. Okay. We'll talk about your gardens later on. One of the great things about working in the garden, of course, is that you're getting outside. The weather has been really fantastic this last week, and I think it's going to continue. I have found that when things are stressful, and just being able to go outside and dig in the dirt or plant something or even pull a few weeds is kind of calming. It's quieter. Yeah, I'm away from the household chores, and because they never seem to get finished. And even if you're just out there watering, it's kind of a calming exercise, and you know that it's needed for your plants, and it helps you and it helps the plants. I have 3 daughters who all like to garden, and that surprises me because none of them wanted to be out in the garden when they were, growing up, but they all like it now. My oldest daughter is an attorney in Denver, and she told me that when she first moved there about 25 years ago, that her job involved lobbying the legislature for crime bills and that sort of thing. And so she was kind of in the middle of politics out there. She said she would come home so stressed and upset and lonely because her husband was still in school and he was be off studying. So she said when the weather was good, she would head out to the backyard, and almost right away she would start to relax. In the spring, she would be taking away the winter debris and turning up the soil and planting tomato plants and petunias and herbs and peppers and whatever else she could. But sometimes it was the hard physical work that replaced the mental stress that she was feeling a good part of the days that she was at work. One thing I've written about often is that your first visit to the garden centers in the spring, in which open usually about late March or so, it's a time to leave your firstborn and your billfold and your cash at home and your credit cards, because seeing all those wonderful plants, everything opening up, is too much of a temptation. And you just want to buy and buy and buy. And sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming and you do buy too much. I have been guilty of that. And everything just looks so wonderful. And when you get it all home, you find that you don't have places for everything, and you really can't take care of it all. So that can become overwhelming and kind of discouraging. So if you want your garden to be restful and pretty and you want fun, so it's best to start small. I would say go to the garden centers and take a look around, see what they're offering, see what the prices are, and then go home and take a look at what you have and the space that you have, and then go back and don't take all your money. But anyway, it's a real temptation. I've always felt guilty because I'll have a few plants I just haven't been able to find a place for, and they dry up in their little kind of packets. And so you don't want to feel guilty. Excuse me, just 1 minute. One of the most important elements in your garden is your soil, of course. And it does need to be healthy and in order to support your plants. I don't use many chemicals or anything on my plants. I don't like chemicals, as I think they are bad for the soil. But I do like compost and banana peels, eggshells, even coffee grounds, plus leaves and shredded bark and aged manure if you can get it. Here's another family story. I'll tell you, I gave each one of my daughters and their family, plus a couple grown grandchildren, a bag of composted manure as a Christmas present. Manure under the Christmas tree. Well, they were amused, but only one family took it home with them, and they wrapped it in paper and plastic and all of that stuff so it wouldn't smell. And it didn't smell anyway, but anyway, the others left their bags with my daughter because we had Christmas at her house and she lives outside our city. And so I figured, since they were not going to use it, those ungrateful kids who literally turn up their noses at it, that I would go out and get them bags and use it in my garden. By the time I got them, my daughter had already opened them all and used them on her garden. So I lost out twice on that one, but who knows what's going to be under their Christmas tree next Christmas. I think it's important to grow what you like in the garden or in your pots or outside your doorway. Vegetables should be what you like to eat. And if you're just starting to garden, you should try some easy plants that grow quickly so that you can see the growth and the accomplishment of that. Bedding plants such as petunias and impatiens are bright and colorful, and they last and bloom most of the summer into the fall if you keep them watered. And if you like tomatoes, they're not hard to grow. You can grow them in sacks, can't you, Joanna, if you want to. And I have one, there's one that's called the 4th of July, and I guess it is ready right around the 4th of July, which is early. And, but I don't know if that's gonna happen this year because we haven't been able to get them in the ground. But I like Early Girl, which is, I like it for the taste and the fact that it is fairly early too, so I can get started on them. There are many wonderful tomatoes, so that you can use some heirloom ones that are, sometimes just Google tomatoes and you'll find that there's so many of them that you could try. And some very, very tasty ones, but they're not that hard to grow. Just let them go. I think, let's see. I think it's a good idea to learn about your plants if you're just beginning to have a garden, or even if you are planting everything in pots, and to find out their watering needs, how much sun or shade or is needed, and because you want to see them grow and you want to put them in the right place around your house or your condo or wherever you're gardening, because you want to realize that there is the satisfaction of working the soil and growing something and seeing it come to harvest time. So some plants need a lot of attention, like people, and you need to be there to kind of meet their needs. So choose ones that you feel that you can take care of. That doesn't always happen. I've had some really, someone told me once that the first 1,000,000 plants that you kill, then you can call yourself a gardener. So I don't know, 1,000,000's a lot, but I know I've killed quite a few. I think gardening really can be a very win-win situation. It's time for yourself, and yet it is flowers and vegetables for your family or for others or your friends. And you're spending some time each day in the garden and when you're planting, just enjoying it, I think is important for good mental health. Working in the garden gives you a sense of accomplishment and purpose that may be hard to get always or anytime or just slightly in your job or your occupation. So it's all your own, and or perhaps unless you share it with someone else in the family, but you know, it's your own work and you're doing it and you want to do it well, and seeing the results is uplifting, I think. We planted a lot of pumpkins usually had about 100 of them by the time we were finished. And then we would have a pumpkin party at in around Halloween and invite the neighbor kids and the grandchildren of the neighbor people and all that. We usually had about 50 people there, and it was great fun, you know, to be with the kids but it was a source of pride because we were giving them the pumpkins that we had grown. I at Thanksgiving time would always brag that I had planted the seed in the spring and I had watched it grow and I had watched the blossoms, the yellow blossoms turn into the pumpkins. And then in the fall had harvested all of them, baked the pumpkin in the oven and stripped it and got all of the inside out and made the pumpkin pie. So this was my claim to fame, to have planted something in the spring and now I was serving it at Thanksgiving to them. So that was kind of fun to do that. How many of you get to mow the lawn? Yeah. I always liked it because we had a riding mower, and I grew up with 3 brothers older than me on a farm, but I never got to drive the tractor. I was a girl for one thing, and surely not smart or strong enough to drive that big tractor. So when we got a riding mower, I kind of moved in on it, and my husband was glad. And we had a couple of acres outside Iowa City, and I did most of the mowing. I did find it very relaxing, and seeing the nicely mown lawn gave me a feeling of accomplishment afterwards. And I do have a grass story to tell you that. Have you ever noticed that after you have mowed the lawn, that a couple days later, it just seems like it's growing a whole lot and you just mowed it. It shouldn't be that long. Well, you begin to think maybe it did grow overnight, and it does grow overnight. Just before dawn, it grows a little bit. And the reason is that it soaks up sunlight all day long, the grass does, and which gives it food. And it still has that energy as it goes into the dark of night. And just before dawn, it expends all that energy and grows a tiny bit and uses it up and gets ready for the sun to come up so they can get more energy again. So if you do think it grows at night, it does. At least that's what I've heard. This spring, one day when it was really warm enough to be out, I was chatting with my daughter who lives here at her house outside and admiring some of the flowers that were beginning to push the ground. It was early. She pointed out 3 Christmas roses in her yard that she had planted 25 years ago. Her young husband had passed away that fall, and to work with her grief, she had spent countless hours planting as many spring bulbs in the yard and near the house as she could. And also still growing is this one single tulip from the many that she planted that long ago. What I'm getting at here is that this was very sad time for her, but she was able to do this planting and feel relaxed and kind of also feel a connection with her husband and with the ground and with growing something, and looking to the future was mainly it. What she put in the ground that fall would be coming up in another 6 months or so. One day I was in the grocery store and I bought a bouquet of flowers, and a friend was there and she said, who did I buy them for? Who was I buying them for? And I said, for myself. And she said, okay, that's great. I think everybody should buy themselves flowers occasionally, at least until you can grow them in your garden. And because that's important to take care of yourself too, as far as just having some flowers around really kind of can lift your spirits. That's about all I have to say about gardening. I want to hear about your gardens and your experience. So if you want to chime in, that would be great. I see Roger, is that it? Do you do a lot of gardening?
Hey there. Yeah, I do a garden every year. I have for probably 20, 30 years, somewhere in there. I generally do a vegetable garden, and I do just, plantings around, my property too, just flowers and stuff like that. But I think what you mentioned is that tomatoes are something I do most years. And again, this year, going to plan to do what I call a salsa garden. So I'm going to do some canning this year again. And I've never done salsa though. So I'm looking forward to this. And I find it's a bit of a competition maybe to find the salsa plants out there. I don't do it from seed anymore, but that's just a bit involved. I have cats that like to eat those little seedlings anyway, so they don't help. They think they're helping, but they're not when they eat those things. But yeah, so I got most of my gardening so far this year. But so I have green onions, I have tomatoes and peppers, and I'll have some corn in there too eventually, but never had much success with the corn, but I'll keep trying.
How are the peppers doing? They like to just sit there, and when it's when it's kind of cold. I mean,
I got those in. I don't even have all of them in, but the issue is all the little critters like to eat those pepper plants right down to the ground. So you got to kind of protect them. But yeah, I don't know how many in there right now, probably 20, something like that.
Yeah, we do have a problem with critters, with deer, particularly around here. And that, I guess that's what I wrote in my column last week, was about tulips that they just love. And if you have some, you need a big fence around them in order to keep them. Though the one tulip that my daughter still had standing, they didn't come and bother it, and she does live in a place where the deer kind of come around. But so maybe it was so old they didn't want it, but it was still perfectly formed. But so the salsa is, you have peppers you're growing to put in the salsa, is that right?
And peppers, onions, and tomatoes. That's about it. I didn't do any herbs or anything like that. I figure I'll just buy that stuff. But yeah, around where I live, I don't really have any deer at all. It's more rabbits and little guys that like to go in and nibble away. So
yeah, it's always a fight with nature, I think, for that has been, way back to pioneer days, things that they had to put up with. But still using a lot of chemicals is not my preference anyway. And I think that with the earth the way it is, everybody is trying to be a little more careful.
I don't really use any chemicals at all in my garden. I do use fertilizer, but that's about it.
You'll have to get some bags of manure for Christmas for yourself, huh?
I might do it sooner than Christmas.
Okay.
It is kind of funny, isn't it, how you mentioned that you didn't have any interest gardening when you were young. And I didn't either. I could care less about landscaping, and I couldn't figure out why my parents were so, involved in it. And I didn't get it. And, when you have your first house and how important it is to, learn all of those things. And it does take a long time to learn, and you can learn the hard way. But I think coming here, from a high altitude, very dry climate where I learned all my gardening, has been a joy, because I get to learn a whole new way of doing it. And of course, dealing with deer is an issue, and all the other varmints that you have here in Iowa. But it really, I don't know, just the learning has been good for my brain, has been good for me to expand, that gardening knowledge.
Yeah. And it's good, you've had experience out there in Colorado, and now this experience, and that you have to change a little bit what you're doing because of, and the soil is different too.
Oh, completely.
Yeah, and so amending it and getting it right and that sort of thing is different. So I love Colorado, by the way. My daughter, I've been out there. I actually lived there for about a year, and but I didn't do any planting at that time.
Very difficult to grow things in, though. I mean, it was, it felt bad to have grass because it was just, watering grass feels so useless, really.
Yeah.
And we learned to do a lot more xeriscaping, and people have to know that xeriscaping isn't just rocks and sand. It is using drought tolerant perennials and things that would probably be 6 feet here.
Yeah,
only 3 feet there.
right. It is. It's a great place to be, though. Let's see, Mary, is it? Do you garden? Is that right? Can you tell me about yours?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I learned gardening from my parents. I have 2 sisters. They were never interested for some reason. I really learned a lot from them.
Good.
And I don't have a big enough yard to do much, but I always plant kitchen herbs so I don't have to buy them. Rosemary and thyme, and I have sage and a number of parsley. So that I do, and I plant flowers and things. I would say that I think there are some organic biological alternatives to chemicals that can be helpful if you have pests, though, like neem oil and things that are available everywhere now. So it is helpful to have that as an alternative to chemicals that are more damaging.
I think they're getting better about. It's more on the market than they're.
I see them everywhere now. Yeah.
And learning about it. So you grow a lot of herbs. So then you use herbs in cooking. Is that right?
I like cooking and I use them. And I have some. I have a very shaded back area, so I've had to explore shade plants. But I finally have a wisteria vine. It took a few years to really get going, but my wisteria has been blooming the last few years, and it's quite wonderful.
Oh,
So,
great. You live here in Iowa City then?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And even though it doesn't get as much sun as it should, the neighbor across the street has a lot fuller blooms because she's in sun. But wisteria can be grown here. They've developed hardier varieties, just like with some of the other kind of more southern plants, azaleas and things. We've got the option now of more hardy varieties, which is great.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the differences they've made even since I've been a master gardener, and of course, I guess that's almost 30 years, is they've changed, things too.
Yes.
Every now and then we get something from Iowa State that says, don't do that anymore.
And I think it's funny too with plants, because every gardener finds out that you have kind of almost like microclimates within your own yard, or micro terroirs. I can never say that word right, but that's why you can see a few places in Iowa City that have beautiful pink dogwoods. They're not going to do well in general, but they have found a home in a few yards and they're happy there. So something is right for them in just that spot.
In that, and you don't know until you try something too, in some of those, but the microclimates, that's something that's given me something to write about in the next few weeks, because they definitely all around everybody's house there are these where it's shade and maybe dry, and the next place is wet, and so you have to decide which one you're going to use. A house is a big shadow, so working around it, finding the sun is important. Let's see, and I have Amanda. I'm sorry, there I am. It's very little type, and I'm having hard to see. Hi, Amanda. Do you have a garden right now?
No, I have space. I don't know what I'm doing. So we have an acreage that's mostly kind of overgrown, and so we're putting in some plants right now, and then we have structures on the property that are it was an old hog farm. And so we're going to repurpose some of the structures to do hydroponics.
Oh,
Yeah, but I don't know what I'm doing at all.
oh, that's terrific. Now, did you say it used to be a horse farm?
A hog farm.
Hog farm. Yes, we lived on our 2 acres where it used to be a hog farm too. Things did grow quite well.
Yeah,
There.
yeah.
So we were happy to have it. So what exactly do you what's your favorite thing to do in the garden as far as
Right now, we're sort of figuring it out. We would like to, there's a lot of lawn. And so we would like to replace the lawn with ground cover that we don't need to mow, that also has little flowers and would support bees and so on. So I don't know if you have any resources to point me towards for someone who has no idea what they're doing.
well,
Clover is a good, isn't clover pretty, it's used out here, I see, to replace lawns. Yep.
That's excellent because it's good for the soil. I mean, when you do mow it down, it's good for the soil, and yet it's the clover, it blossoms will bring on the important beneficial insects and that sort of thing. So that would be a good thing to plant. And it's pretty, you know.
Hey, Amanda, you could start a hive. You could have some beehives, plant clover, then you'll have some lovely, you know, clover honey. So there you go.
The plant, one of the old buildings, I think, has bees living in the walls.
Oh, well, it sounds like you're making some plans, and you know, I think that's one thing that's important is that. And I say this and I don't do it very often, but you know, make a plan, write things down in the wintertime when you're not doing other things. And then also in the summertime and at the end of the season to write down what's worked and what hasn't worked and whether you really enjoyed it and that sort of thing. I mean, just a few words sometimes will remind you the next year what you want to plant and what you don't want to plant, and also I think that, you know, putting it on paper gives you that satisfaction of that you've done this and that you've made this grow and that sort of thing. So that's great. You have a lot of exciting things going on there. And let's see, Elizabeth, right? Hi.
Yeah, I took the master gardening about the year I retired in 2019, and then we had COVID, so it was hard to get my hours.
Oh yeah. So
I really liked going down to the fairgrounds and working there. They do donate some of the food to the food bank that I think terrific.
That is.
They have a cutting garden. We have heritage tomatoes, and I hope to do the butterfly house again. I'm living in Chicago for a year and I'm going to be moving back and getting in my hours. I work with one of the master gardeners, Chris Sidrell. They do the downtown. They do the firefighters. But that's locked, so that's a little hard. So I had a 3/4 acre yard, and I learned a lot, killed a lot of plants, and I found that there were some plants you could do that are very poorly behaved and invasive. Like you could put it in a pot, but thyme, the mint, not so good. And short allium are just terrible. So you can't call the extension service and the master gardeners man that for questions. And Iowa State is a wonderful, you can click onto their site to, get some information. And then of course, I had some questions for you, Judy, like soil testing, if you knew where the better places were for soil testing, resources for seed savers, where you can get native species. I know some of the sources sort of dried up, but you know, I got, they did have trilliums, native trilliums. It's a little hard to find Jack in the Pulpits. I must say, I did go into a park and get some. And I know where and May apples. It's those are good for shade. So I have some a little native. I had a native area in my yard with that I kind of groomed over the years. That was very pretty, and it was sort of my dog cemetery. So, but.
So you're living in Chicago now, or are you in Iowa City?
Chicago, but I'm moving back to Iowa City, and I'm going to rent. And the person I'm renting from is going to give me carte blanche on her duplex. And I kind of scoped out the gardens, and they're close to the house because her grandma gardened.
Oh, wonderful! That makes it a lot easier.
From my old yard, some of my ligularia. Sweet Woodruff was a great shady ground cover. And yeah.
What were your questions again? What was that first question? It was about.
Well, one would be like sources for native plants.
Well, for native plants, I wish I'm not sure because I think that maybe Googling that might be the best thing for that. I'm trying to think when I know a few people who do grow a lot of native plants. I don't know if they share them or not. And one of the people in our PEO group does a lot of it. I might give you her name later on if you'd like it, and see if she's given us talks on native plants before. So I know that she grows them, but I tell you what, I will find out about that and email Joanne and let you know her name and that sort of thing. It's okay to get in touch with her. You said something about soil testing. Who does the best? Actually, I think Johnson County Extension Office would be the best place to take your soil out there, and then they send it someplace, maybe even Iowa State.
Somewhere. Yeah, I think they had it at Iowa State, but they were no longer testing. And I think you can go to. I've seen Earl May have things that you can mail in.
Good.
And I think you can even get worms and brown worms and.
Yeah. Add some to your. You mean to add some to your to your dirt because to your soil. I think it's important that you do know what kind of soil that you have, and of course, all of us usually use like Miracle Grow or something like that to adding to it, and that helps. I had a soil thermometer in mine all through the winter, as a matter of fact. But anyway, it was measuring only, like 40 degrees when it was already April, and the ground just was, the soil just was not warm enough to receive anything. So I think a thermometer is an important thing to have. But I also think that, having your soil tested is a good idea. So.
How about the pH of the soil? I see people have these pH devices too.
That would help you as to whether, what kind of plants you're going to put in, if you're going to acid loving plants, if that's what you want to plant there. I don't know, there's actually something that you can, they could tell you that with what your pH is when you take a soil sample in, but you're saying that there are pH things that you can put in and find out right away.
Exactly. So what do you recommend, like for natural fertilizer too? I watch Melinda Myers a lot. Well, my sister's a master gardener in Wisconsin, and she does a lot of free webinars through Wisconsin. And I think she's sponsored by Mill Organite, but I've heard plus minus that there's heavy metals in Mill Organite, which is, I think, recycled from waste plant in Milwaukee. Sewage plant.
Yeah.
You like manure?
And you're talking about natural things to put in. Yeah. Oh, I was mentioning that some of the things that I've used, I mean, even coffee grounds and that sort of thing are good. The compost, I think, is the best thing. And most of us, like, I live in an apartment in a condo building, and so I said, let's get a compost pile out there, but no one really wants to be in, to work with it. And but many of us had said, we're throwing away the eggshells and the banana peels and the coffee grounds and all those things that could be used in the soil. I think that anything natural, manure is great as long as it's dried and it's not hot anymore. And someone said they had pig manure. There were pigs, and that's what we always had had before we moved into our place. And boy, the soil was good.
I think you could probably find like some people that have horses, and so you could probably go online and to Facebook and put a plea out there for old cow manure. My girlfriend uses just like a big bucket once a year and works that into her soil, and her garden's pretty amazing.
Oh yeah, it takes a little extra to do those sort of things. Search out those things and then actually do the work and that sort of thing. I think that maybe, I got a little lazy. I right now I have a small garden in Coralville in the community garden up there, which hasn't been planted yet because I haven't gotten around to it. But and then a small one where I live, we have a little 9x6 gardens, and you'd be surprised how much stuff you could get in there. But so some of the things that people with large areas might go out and get some manure and do that. That's the sort of thing that I probably don't get involved in, but I think that's all a good idea. You all seem to have a let's see, we have Mary Lou. Oh, did I talk to you already, Mary Lou? Maybe you're already gone. Have I talked to everybody?
Yeah, I think you have.
Okay, are we running out of time? Probably.
One other comment, we were talking before COVID about people who sell at the farmer's market. And I'm not sure if they throw the produce out or what, but there's a movement to maybe glean vegetables. So people going to the food bank in the summer can have a, better variety of food.
I believe Table to Table does that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's been different with COVID. It's just boy, it changed everybody's life as far as what you eat, what you feel safe doing, and that sort of thing. So and I think gardening probably so one safe thing that you might feel like. I mean, you're out there, you don't necessarily have to be alone. Maybe the kids will be with you, but it's recreation. It's not work.
I think COVID kind of shut down some of these ideas about gleaning and all that stuff because of having people show up. So I'm hoping the movement kind of gains momentum. So, because I think people are more food insecure with everything else that's going on in the world, and and I think their diets will suffer.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Judy. I think we could probably talk about gardening all day. To bring it back to kind of the mental health picture, I think you know, as you said, it can really give you a sense of satisfaction. I know that when I'm gardening, I'm there. I'm absolutely in the moment, and for very few things allow me to do that. And so it's just it's a wonderful way to rest your head and get some results too at the same time.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing, and we appreciate your expertise. And we invite you to our NAMI events, and be sure and take note of our other lunch and learns that coming up. We have one coming up with Andrew McKnight, who's going to talk about, I think I'm trying to remember the name of the topic. I think it's cultural competencies in policing. And so he's on the NAMI board, and he knows a lot about how to train young officers in understanding cultural conflict and implications on the street. And so he's going to talk a little bit about that. And that will be Wednesday, June 15th at 11:30.
Okay. Well,
Or
thank you.
11:45.
It was fun to do this. It was fun to talk to you and
Thank you.
see some new faces and that sort of thing. So thank you for having me.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.